Welcome to Monday, June 17th, 2024. This day with the podcast being brought to you by Wyoming State Parks. Why wonder about the outdoors in Wyoming? Explore the statewide interactive recreation wonder map to find your next adventure. Well, speaking of adventures, we've got quite the adventure weather-wise coming for a lot of the nation here in the coming days, as it's going to be a wild ride. Coast to coast. There's just a lot going on across the nation. As you can see, a lot going on in the skies above Steamboat Springs late last week with some wave clouds there forming and great cloud photos coming your way here shortly. Now, the Pacific front that we talked about late last week is going to be settling in to the northern Rockies and the Pacific Northwest, then moving across the northern plains. This will usher in unseasonably cool air. We're going to have a little bit of everything. We're going to have some cooler air come in. We're going to have some windy areas. Unfortunately, we saw plenty of wind in some areas over the weekend. More is coming today into tomorrow. We're going to see some thunderstorms pop up today. Some areas could see severe weather, especially east of the divide. And as we talked late last week, the risk of snow in some of the northern Rockies is certainly looking more and more likely over the next 48 hours. A big heat wave hitting the eastern and northeastern areas of the United States. So you're going to see quite the contrast. So the heat in the east, cool in the west, and it's going to be very wet in between the two areas where the temperatures are so different. And that's typical. You're going to get a lot of wet between the extremes. Temperatures will moderate, getting back to, let's say, more seasonal temperatures by the end of the week and into the upcoming weekend. Some great shots coming in. Now, this is from last Thursday of some thunderstorm activity that for you folks in Cheyenne, there's been plenty of good viewing of thunderstorms getting other folks, but not you. And you'll see more of that here coming up here shortly. Just fabulous shot there of lightning. And then some high clouds there showing a lot of wind aloft near Thermopolis over the weekend and beautiful sunset near Shoshone. And then it was feast or famine with rain. And that's really where it's been. Either you got a downpour like what happened here in Pine Bluffs, or you got a sprinkle. Downpour or sprinkle. There was really nothing in between over the last 3 or 4 days with the thunderstorms. Now, for those of you in Colorado, Nebraska, and parts of eastern Wyoming, you got quite the show yesterday evening from a line of thunderstorms that developed across northeast Colorado that then moved into Nebraska. Some just towering thunderstorms that, with the blue skies, made for a beautiful shot situation in terms of getting the camera out and taking a look, especially when you get these thunderheads like this near sundown. You just get color, texture, and you get to see all of the beautiful things that you get to see. And we could see the clouds, those thunderstorms, for miles. If you saw them and then looked at the radar, you were kind of aghast at how far away they may have been from you. But one of those situations, you get on the high plains and in the Rocky Mountain West where you get shows just like what we had Sunday evening across the high plains. As we go forward, this Pacific trough coming our way is going to be producing more thunderstorms, some big ones like what you're seeing in the photo here, later on this afternoon and evening. Now, Yellowstone Park, this was late last week, a great shot up in Yellowstone Park. Some rain clouds settling on in. Will those trees have a little white on them before the end of the week, over the next couple of days? Well, maybe. We'll show you that here in a minute. The satellite imagery this morning is showing a cluster of thunderstorms. This area of thunderstorms turned into what we call a mesoscale convective complex, as those thunderstorms formed over northeast Colorado, went through Nebraska, and got themselves better organized last night. This area of cloudiness right here is part of the trough coming into the Pacific Northwest. You see the blue right here? This is an area of low clouds, and this is what we call an outflow boundary. Air coming out of this thunderstorm complex, cool, moist air, is pushing westward, and it's going upslope. And you can see that there's a boundary of stratus clouds, low clouds, coming out of this thunderstorm complex. Now, what this will do, this adds an interesting dynamic to the afternoon, because the addition of this cool, moist air, higher dew points, higher humidity, will be in eastern areas of Wyoming, northern Colorado, and western Nebraska today, because it was left behind by this. So we may see the initiation maybe further west in this area of thunderstorms today because of that. as that trough approaches. So there is going to be some strong to severe thunderstorm development today, and this outflow boundary may enhance that. This is that complex I talked about, the radar this morning showing some heavy rains there across Minnesota, parts of South Dakota, northeastern areas of Nebraska. Then here's the showers associated with the Pacific trough, just like this. When you put it all together, if you look at the watches and warnings and advisories across the lower 48, you have heat advisories right here, as well as right here. But here's the heat in the Northeast and the Great Lakes that's building. Flood watches here, severe thunderstorm watches here. Then you have red flag advisories, red flag warnings for high fire danger. The brown is areas where we have wind advisories or wind warnings in effect. And then further back west, you're going, oh, what's that purple here? You know what these are? Frost and freeze warnings for central and northern areas of Nevada and parts of Oregon. Yeah, frost or freeze warnings for the cold air coming in behind it. Then the pink and purple up here, these are winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings for the mountains of Montana and Idaho. So you got a little bit of everything on the map here. And we're going to have a lot of weather down here in the Gulf, as we'll show you here in a minute. So there's the trough coming in. There's the hot dome of high pressure in the east. So things going about as expected. This is where the severe weather risk is today. And I would not be surprised, due to that outflow boundary, to see the severe weather go a little bit further west, that yellow area. A little bit further west, you can see dry air is on the other side of the divide, but there's a convergence of this moisture right here. And this is going to be a very wet area, especially up into the upper plains, the upper Midwest over the next 24 to 48 hours. There's the severe weather threat for tomorrow. Wind is a factor. Hate to say it, but it's going to be very windy along Interstate 80, the wind gaps of Wyoming, even very windy across Utah, western Colorado, then later on getting very windy out here in the eastern Colorado plains across Nebraska and Kansas. Because of this unseasonably strong trough, there's a very strong temperature gradient, and that's going to cause the winds to pick up and get strong and gusty. And there's the temperature gradient. This is by 6 p.m. tonight. Look at the cold settling into the Great Basin. Look at the heat building over there. So if you look at the continent, it's just a huge contrast between the cold and the warm. So you're going to have a lot of weather in between. This is by Wednesday noon. The trough kind of gets elongated, and it's kind of a standoff. We still have the hot dome here, cool, moist air sitting in the Pacific Northwest, the northern plains states, and then we have a lot of wind aloft coming into the gradient between there. This is also going to make, as I just showed you, a lot of shower and thunderstorm activity here. We have this tropical wave in the Gulf of Mexico that's headed towards Mexico. That's going to be increasing the rain there, and maybe up north a little bit later on. These are the temperature anomalies by noon tomorrow. Look at Montana, parts of Wyoming, the Intermountain West. Temperatures, when you start to get into the purple, you're more than 20 degrees below average, below the 30-year averages. So you're talking about noticing how cool it's going to be while the heat continues in the east. This is what we're going to see on Wednesday. So it's still going to be warm along and east of the divide today, but Tuesday and Wednesday, you'll certainly feel it turning cooler. This is where the precipitation is going to be between now and Thursday. Notice the red down here. Notice the thunderstorm activity picking up in New Mexico and the panhandles. This is because of this moisture starting to maybe get drawn up a little bit, and this will be a factor later on. Here's the heavier precipitation in the upper plains in the Midwest, right underneath the low, significant rain across many areas of Montana. And then where it's cold enough, the mountains will get, there it is, the chances for snow. The European model is even showing some flakes of snow in the high mountains of Colorado, back into the high Wasatch. And look how far south. Now these are at very high levels, except up into Montana and parts of Alberta and British Columbia, where the snow levels will be pretty low for June. Later in the week, this is by Saturday, the dome of high pressure splits, and we'll see this front head east. That will bring relief to the heat by later in the weekend and early next week to the northeast and the Great Lakes, while this high pressure ridge builds here, and that starts to bring in the warmth this weekend and into early next week back to the west. What we'll have to watch is how much of this moisture gets drawn up into Arizona, New Mexico, and points northward if all of that moisture down in the Gulf of Mexico does have a chance to move westward. See how wet from Florida to the Texas Gulf Coast into Mexico here. This is all a lot of tropical activity with this moisture heading westbound. So there's a lot of moving parts. See all the heavy moisture between the cold here and the warm here. So some significant rains, probably too much rain for many folks up into that area. And then again, it's feast or famine along the Front Range and I-25 corridor with the scattered showers and thunderstorms. Have yourself a good Monday. We'll see you tomorrow.